I'd like to call the meeting to order. I want to remind everybody that this is the East Brandywine Township Supervisors PM meeting on Thursday, April 20th, 2023. And remind everybody that a recording device will be in use during the meeting, which so let's open with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rules of comment, or public comment for the agenda, rules of conduct of public meetings established by Resolution 2001-08 states that the time allocated to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. Is there
See if there's public comment.
what did I do?
Just asking if there was any.
Oh, yeah. Any public comments? I'm sorry, I assumed Francis, that you're visiting. This is approval of the April 6, 2023 Board of Supervisors AM minutes.
Make a motion to approve the April 6, 2023 Board of Supervisors AM meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Treasurer's report. An authorization to pay bills and approve payroll. I have reviewed the treasurer's report and I have reviewed the bills, and I'll make a motion to approve the treasurer's report and the payrolls.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will comment on the treasurer's report that we did issue 6 building permits. So the first since last September, when we issued 7 for the year last year. So there were 5 at Mapleview and 1 was part of the old Whitaker farm. They're building or rebuilding a house. Okay. Reports from the township. Let's start with the manager's report.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to start with a reminder that the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors Annual Conference is Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of next week. Both Chairman and Croft and I plan to attend, and will have limited access to email and phones. I'd like to remind the board there are 2 upcoming events before the next meeting, evening meeting of the Board of Supervisors. The first of which is Parks and Recreation's annual For the Parks golf outing, which will be held on May 17th at 8 a.m. It's not too late to register for that event. You may register on our website at ebrandywine.org. And also the third of 3 spring speaker series hosted by the East Brandywine Township Historical Commission, featuring a presentation on Dr. Whittier C. Atkinson entitled Build Your Own Door. That will be in this building, in this room, on May 21st, 2023 at 3 p.m. I will keep the balance of my report this evening and read it during agenda item 7D later on. Respectfully submitted, Township Manager.
Thank you. Building Inspector's report is included in your packet. guess I was wrong. There's 5 townhomes. I thought there was 1 home, but maybe it's something different. All right, the next item is the Roadmaster's report, which,
There is no roadmaster's report this evening, Mr. Chairman.
okay, thank you. Next will be the Police Department report.
Good evening. First item on the agenda is that the Police Department would like to congratulate Deputy Chief Jeffrey Ankanich's completion of his bachelor's degree in Public Safety Administration from Newman University this past week. I mentioned this at his swearing in, but he has officially finished his degree. The Deputy Chief had a grade point average of 4.1, which was the 3rd highest in his graduating class, and we want to send out congratulations to the Deputy Chief. We would also like to congratulate Officer Chris Fox and his wife Mackenzie on the birth of their son August. Mom and baby August are doing great. The Police Department participated in the Downingtown School District's Connections food drive this past weekend. This was held at the Lionville Middle School, and if you're not familiar with that, this is where police officers work alongside the students and they collect food for the area food banks in a drive-through type drop-off system. During the month of March, the department handled, we had 2,344 incidents. We completed 172 investigations, had 10 criminal arrests, 0 summary arrests, 2 warrant arrests, 1 juvenile petition was completed. We were fortunate, we only had 2 accidents last month. There were 151 traffic citations issued, 72 traffic warnings were issued, and officers completed 10,517 miles of patrol. Training completed for the month. Detective Bo Shepard attended a basic sex crimes training class. Also, Gary Parsons and Officer Rebecca Sosa completed their field sobriety training certification. Officer John Hayes and Officer Maureen Ray are completing their GST, which is Gracie Survival Tactics Hand-to-Hand, if you want to call it combat, but control techniques. That's their instructor recertification class, and they take that because of requirements we have from the state to take training in that area. And Sergeant James Ferraro completed his less lethal instructor recertification. We had 1 correspondence from, I'm gonna butcher this, Saro Ramdas, thanking us for watching his home while they were on vacation. And you have attached to your report tonight a list of the monthly investigations and the officers' activity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And next is the fire company report, and we have a guest who's going to present that.
So there were 61 total incidents for the month, 34 total fire incidents, 27 total medical incidents. East Brandywine Township had 10 fire and 14 medical calls. Average personnel response was 14 and 18 for building fires. 252.7 gallons used in East Brandywine Township, and the average was 6 total, not the average, but the total trainings this period was 6. Total hours of training altogether, 253 hours, 0.5. Submitted East Brandywine Fire Company.
Thank you. I have a note or of wonderment about the fire company. I've noticed that we're being called in at faraway places as backup. Is that due to the fact we have personnel that can respond?
Yeah, that's actually funny you brought that
And
up.
I'm worried that we burn our people out.
It's funny you brought that up because for mutual aid, they had 1 in Cal Township, 1 in Coatesville, 2 in Downingtown Borough, 2 in East Fallowfield, and 5 in West Whiteland.
They were also at Parksburg on the apartment
Yeah.
fire, which is not Coatesville.
Right, that's.
Yeah, that will be in the next month's report. so.
Okay,
So the county has procedures that are set up in regards to response to fire incidents or, incidents that require the fire company. So what happens is the local department will get called out, and then when that chief gets on scene, depending on what they're dealing with, they'll put out a request for other units, and then the county has a list. If I understand correctly, they have a list, depending on the region or area they're in, that's the next department to get called. We're kind of like in the middle.
Well, the
All
common
that.
sense, like the West Whitelands, I know one of the trustees there, and I actually talked to him. And Euclid or Lineville wasn't called,
Yeah,
or
now-
was East Whiteland, which are both, it was a brush fire. Both were within a 3-mile distance of the fire, and yet we were called to,
I wonder if it's a piece of equipment that we have that maybe another company, I don't know. There's something like West Whiteland, you'd have to ask the chief on that, but typically around here, they'll respond as backups, but it could be a piece of equipment specifically they were looking for. Our company has it, and somebody else doesn't. That would be my guess on that. But that's obviously the chief's wheelhouse, so.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any old business? Seeing none, I will move on to new business. 7A, amending adopted minutes of the March 16th, 2023 PM Board of Supervisors session.
Yes, I was attending the meeting remotely and no one could hear me, but I just wanted to correct it on there that I wanted to just say for my vote for the woodworking equipment for Bonzo Mill was nay. And to further thought over that, even though it passed 2-0, I just wanted the public to know that, I was present and I voted. So,
All right,
if we
so-
could just change that last sentence right here.
So what's the process? We
Okay,
make a
so
motion to...
if I may, I've had the benefit of doing the editing on the video that got posted, and I will confess that I was very confused in real time, but having the benefit to review the video afterward, I was able to piece together exactly what happened. We're referring to a set of minutes that this board adopted on April 6th and referring to the meeting that happened on March 16th. So on page 5 of the minutes of the March 16th meeting, and that is in your packet, the page 5 pertains to the wood milling machine purchase for Bondsville Mill. There is a sentence that reads, "Due to audio issues, Supervisor Winters was not able to be heard, therefore no vote was cast. Motion passed with two members voting aye." If I could be so bold, I think Jason is suggesting we amend the previously adopted minutes to reflect that Supervisor Winters voted no and could not be heard due to audio issues.
Okay, I make a motion that we amend the minutes to record the no vote from Supervisor Winters.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll stay.
All right. 7B, East Brandywine Township Representative to the Downingtown Area Recreation Consortium, DARC.
Right, after many years of representation on the Downingtown Area Recreation Recreation Consortium, Township resident and former Supervisor Hud Volz is stepping down, creating a vacancy on that multi-municipal entity's board. I asked Nicole, the executive director of DARC, to prepare a description of what the duties of a representative are. This is included in your packet. What I'm asking the board to consider this evening is either to appoint one of your own to be the representative to DARC, or to authorize staff to advertise this among the committees and in the public to see if there's a representative interested in representing East Brandywine Township at DARC.
My recommendation would be to offer it out to the public first, and if they can't fill the void, then one of us could obviously step forward.
I would agree with that.
Fair enough. We will,
Okay.
we will market the opportunity.
All right, item 7C, procedures for remote access to public meetings of the Board of Supervisors.
All right, just two agenda items ago, we addressed an issue that arose out of a poor quality connection. And working with Chairman Croft, I threw together some thoughts on a policy regarding remote participation for members of the Board of Supervisors. I think it's worth noting that the second-class Township Code has no restriction on remote participation relative to either forming a quorum or casting votes, as long as it's a means that they can hear what's going on and they can cast their vote. What I see as potential issues with remote access and the means to rectify them are as follows. I think that in order to be eligible to participate remotely, staff, specifically myself, would like 24 hours notice to make the necessary physical arrangements to facilitate remote access. Second, I think as a matter of policy, we should not host meetings where more than one supervisor is participating remotely. And I say that for the purpose of producing a quality experience for the members of the public who might be interested in attending. And then the third is, if the remote participant is the chairman, then I think that the meeting should be run by the vice chairman who is physically present. I think that remote participation should be intended only for board members who cannot physically attend the meetings for reasons of illness, disability, military service, or geographic distance. My next recommendation is upon request for remote attendance by a board member, and if the qualifications are met, the township manager will make the accommodations for the possibility of remote attendance. Remote participants shall use a service provided by the township managers that allows them to be heard by those physically present at the meeting and to hear all activities and discussion of the meeting clearly. The township meeting hall is equipped to facilitate remote participation by one of two means: a video conference service or by a telephone conference call. It is my preference that where possible we should use the video conferencing service. I think that the names of any remote participant shall be explicitly noted for the record, and the entrance, exit, or re-entrance of the meeting by any remote participant should be noted in the meeting minutes. So if we have a connection and a disconnection and a reconnection, those instances need to be reflected in the minutes. For clarity, I think that all votes taken during a meeting where there is a remote participant should be by roll call, as in there's a motion and a second to vote. We need to record the votes of all three members individually to ensure that everyone's vote is heard by the remote, and so that our minute taker can clearly write down the notes. And then I think lastly, by way of setting expectations, I think if the remote participant experiences technical difficulties, discussion should be suspended until the participant is able to participate fully again. But I think that the chairman should have the authority to suspend attempts to connect after any trouble connecting that lasts longer than 10 minutes, out of respect for the members of the public who may be in attendance. I'm not suggesting this as a resolution or an ordinance. I take this as an exercise in just setting everyone's expectations of how and when remote access can be facilitated by staff. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have about my proposal for a policy.
General comment is we have a similar policy on the school board, which is a little different because there's 9 members, but there is a definite policy there and a definite procedures in the school code. I have a question on number 4 as to participation. For instance, you may not remember, but I mentioned today that I cannot attend the next supervisors meeting because my wife is having surgery. That's not included in here, so therefore I can't participate remotely.
It doesn't say your illness, it says reasons of illness.
I'm glad we have a lawyer
But
here.
illness is not surgery. Illness is you're sick.
Well, nobody's gonna call you on that one.
I'd happily amend that to reflect that,
How about family commitments?
And when it's appropriate, I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Is there any, well, let's talk about family commitments or what wording might put in there.
how about providing care for,
Well, they don't let me in the
And-
room. They don't let me do the operation.
well, you will be missing it because you will be providing care for an immediate family
Right,
member.
okay.
And I feel like.
Put some kind of wording that covers that.
Speaking of wording that covers, I think you should also put at the end of it that the acting chairman has the authority to do things on the cuff. Meaning, what if there's a situation, which has happened in the past, where one of the supervisors is traveling and doing it remotely, and then all of a sudden something happens at the last minute, and the other guy has to call in, and meanwhile, everybody's here, and it just happened at the last minute. If there's a connection and everything's good, I think you should have the authority, Carl, or whoever the chairman is at the time, to say, you know what, we're gonna just go ahead and press forward with the meeting, even though it doesn't affect policy. Whoever the chairman is can decide that at that time.
I thought he had that covered in here. You have that covered?
Well, I had anticipated there would be, that if there were technical difficulties, there would be a timeline at which point the chairman could feel comfortable saying, I'm very sorry, we tried, but we're going to proceed with the meeting without the remote
You
participant.
had said, if two supervisors weren't here doing it remotely,
If both lose connection, you
Yeah,
can't have a
and-
meeting anymore.
And,
Yeah.
and this might be the matter to which the solicitor wanted to comment, but my understanding is that while we need to have meetings advertised meetings in a physical space, there is no restriction on the number of members of the Board of Supervisors who participate remotely. I'm suggesting that as a matter of policy, that the board would voluntarily table all action items and suspend a meeting where there was only one supervisor sitting here.
Well, and you're right, I did want to address that. There's nothing in the Sunshine Law or the second-class township code that authorizes or prohibits remote participation. To my knowledge, there is one judicial case where this issue was decided, and it involved a state agency, Milk Marketing Board. And someone challenged some action they took because one of the members was participating remotely. That case decided that it was permissible. But I wouldn't take that as meaning that someone couldn't challenge a procedure or some action that was taken when one or more supervisors was not present. So I think Luke's draft policy embodies the concept that it should be sort of a last resort. In other words, we shouldn't do this as a matter of routine, but, and I think maybe you need to add vacation sometime, if it's not in here, sometimes a vacation, and you can't make it.
Well,
So, anyway, it should be used sparingly. And I think the most important part of it is, as Luke indicated, it has to be such that you can be heard and you can hear the public or the other participants of the meeting. And that's where the rub comes in, because somebody's going to say, well, and it happened in these minutes we just talked about. We couldn't hear, we weren't able to comment on some action, and that's why it should be used as little as possible.
right, and as it relates to vacations, I'll point out, my number 4, the last of that itemized list is
Right.
geographic distance. I didn't specify the
Right, I
purpose
I
why you
picked up
might.
on that.
Yeah, I don't know why you're in Alaska. It could be business or pleasure, but you're in Alaska, so you're eligible to participate remotely.
also agree that we shouldn't have a meeting with one person here or no people here. I should say no supervisors or only one supervisor here.
And this is just an administrative document then, or whatever you would
Right.
call it? Just, it's not a resolution, it's not an ordinance, it's a procedure,
Policy.
a policy, there you go.
Yeah,
Even says policy.
again, I use the language, it's about setting expectations and
Right.
I very much want to facilitate a high-quality connection with a remote participant. And what I would like to communicate to the board is that I cannot do so on short notice. And so, again, that begs the question, how much notice do I need? Well, I'm suggesting, give me a business day. I can do that. It's not a law, it's just me communicating what I can do in a reasonable time frame.
One last, or not one, a question that just popped in my mind. Does the second-class township code define what a policy is by any chance?
No.
For instance, in the school code, a policy is similar to our ordinances.
It does not talk about policy.
They don't call them ordinances, they're policies.
Right, it's your policy book. And
Right.
It was fashioned by the School Boards Association, if memory serves.
About this
Right.
yay thick. Okay. So, I guess we should have a vote on this. So I will make a motion that we adopt the remote participation for Board of Supervisors members policy as presented, incorporating the input from the group here.
I'll second.
All those, any discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for that. Okay, the next item is the revision of the zoning maps, 7D.
I've got a little bit of show and tell for the board this evening, so please bear with me. Got to adjust some camera angles and what's shown on the screen. All right, for the purposes of illustration, as I go through what the proposed changes to the zoning map are, I have projected on the screen a split. Well, on the left side there is our existing zoning map, and on the right is what I've labeled version 5 of the draft zoning map. And I've also got that projected so that anybody watching the video remotely can follow along as I go through. So included in your packets this evening is a draft zoning map marked version 5 and last revised April 19th, 2023. This map represents the Planning Commission's recommendation to replace our existing map. This evening, I will summarize the changes between our existing map and the draft number 5. I understand that Chairman Croft will then present an additional change not recommended by the Planning Commission for the board's consideration. There can be no vote to adopt a new zoning map this evening. The township solicitor and I will need a final proposed map in order to prepare a plan for implementation. A prerequisite for this implementation plan is a revised zoning map that shows a complete list of all the changes that we will need to use for public notice by means of including mailed notices and physical signage throughout the community. So with that, I'm going to start with the summaries and the changes. I'm going to start with, there's a revised base map / street grid from Chester County GIS. So the shapes of the parcels reflect lot line changes and subdivisions that have occurred since the last time we revised the zoning map. I've also elected to omit a few details in layers in GIS that I don't think are useful. Just looking at what you see in front of you, the current map shows the location of a an interstate pipeline. I think that's unnecessary for the purposes of communicating zoning, so I've omitted that. I've also omitted bodies of water. The second thing is now I'm going to start navigating here. On the proposal, there's a section of additional information, and these are not zones per se, but they're types of information that I wanted to convey to the public for the purposes of making the map more useful. And so the first of these I want to talk about is that the horizontal lines that are shown overlay over the residential districts, R1, R2, R3, and industrial/residential, or institutional/residential, which is IR districts, are those developments that were developed as clusters. I think this information is vital for residents, homeowners, landowners to get full use out of a zoning map. Important details like the setbacks on their property, the total impervious surface. They would need to know whether they were developed whether their home was developed as a cluster or as a non-cluster development. So new to this version is an information item indicating whether that was developed as a cluster. Also, on the information item side of revised changes, there are two areas that that are in the TND2, the Traditional Neighborhood Development Overlay, which were developed or will be developed, and those districts required conditional use approval. I've indicated on the map with the vertical orange hash those areas that have received approval to be developed per the TND2 overlay, traditional neighborhood development as a conditional use. On the subject, also continuing the theme of information items, with blue vertical crosshatch, I've indicated those areas that have received conditional use approval to be developed per a different overlay district called the age-qualified residential community. That is the Brandywine Walk development. And then finally, under information, just pure informational items, I have in two developments, specifically Applecross and in the estates at Dallin Forge, indicated where a homeowner needs to be aware that what they can do with their property is affected by a settlement agreement, a prior decision filed with the courts. So I have marked for these Applecross homes a blue outline where a homeowner would want to reference the settlement agreement and not just our code to make decisions about what they could do on their parcel. And for illustration purposes, I'm going to scroll over to the estates at Dallin Forge. You'll see that I have marked those with a green outline, indicating that those homes may have unique conditions that are established by the settlement agreement. All right, so I've summarized some base layer changes and some information items that are new. And now I'm going to move over to what I consider corrections to our existing map. I'd like to start with the way in which the MHP, or Mobile Home District, renders on our existing map versus the proposed. So here is the same district. The boundary is unchanged, but in my estimate, the mobile home park is a zoning overlay. It's described as a district that allows certain uses within R2. It is not a base zone. And so you'll note that the plan on the right shows it as a hatch area over the top of R2, which I think is more useful than the way it rendered in the old plan. I don't think this, and I will defer to the solicitor, I don't think this is certainly not intended to change anything that's allowed or to change the boundary of the mobile home park district. But I think it would be much more clear to a homeowner looking at this that their home is located in the R2 district and also located within the mobile home park zoning overlay. I think that's a little more intuitive than a homeowner trying to figure out why their single-family or detached home is in the mobile home park district.
You said R2, it's R1, I believe, here.
You are correct. Your amendment is correct. The pink is R1.
See, I am following you.
You are following along. The next one that I consider to be an error in the manner in which our current plan renders is that our current zoning map shows a district called VE, which is short for Village Extension. And while the Village Extension as a zoning overlay was drawn over the R2 district in the zoning map, there's no part of our code that describes what you can and can't do in the Village Extension overlay.
Didn't it used to be called Village VC?
No, VC is there's still a zone called VC, and it's a base zone.
Okay, I don't see it on the map here.
Okay, so VC is used up in the
Oh, up in Lindell.
It's exactly, it's Lindell. Oh. So while the current map shows village extension, we don't in anywhere in our code describe what village extension means. So I have omitted it in its entirety from my proposed map. Exactly how to handle that relative to providing notice to homeowners, I will defer to advice from the solicitor, but I do think it is misleading to draw a district that is not defined in our code. All right, now I'd like to move to what are clearly rezoned areas. These would be parcels that are in one zone and if this plan is adopted would be in another zone. And I'm going to start with the size of the TND2 overlay district. I can zoom out a little and you can compare. So while the village extension, which I was just referring to, is shown as these pale blue horizontal lines, the TND2 overlay district is shown as the diagonal crosshatch. And you will note that it has been reduced or eliminated in certain areas adjacent to the TND1 neighborhood. This proposal was contemplated as part of the 2022 comprehensive plan. And I want to point out specifically a couple recommendations that came out of our 2022 comprehensive plan. First of all, recommendation CC1, which was to preserve the scenic vista at McCausland Farm as an iconic view shed in the township and a distinctive entry to the Guthriesville Village. I'd like to also draw your attention to recommendation GV1, which was to update the zoning map to reduce the village residential area and encourage the preservation of agricultural land and the scenic view as you enter the village as shown on the future land use map. So both of these proposed changes are supported by our comprehensive plan process. The second area where changes are being proposed has to do with the southern boundary of the R3 district. So again, the existing map on the left and the proposed on the right. You'll notice that the R3 area, shown in yellow, no longer bisects the Applecross development, but is instead extended south to East Reeseville Road. In an effort to make the map more useful for the public, the line delineating R2 and R3 has been adjusted to make all portions of the Applecross North Tract as R3. The Applecross North Tract was defined in the approved plan for Applecross development. The development of the North Tract was governed by provisions of a 2004 settlement agreement between Pulte Homes and the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors. This settlement agreement specified that the North Tract was to be developed as R3. While the proposed revision will make the map more useful, the parcels of the North Tract must retain the informational plan note, the purple outline, to reference the agreement as unique provisions not established in any existing East Brandywine Township zone remain in place. An example of this is in the phases 2 through 3 single-family detached homes located in the North Tract. All that to say, I think a homeowner living on Bolero, looking at this map, at the existing map, could gain no useful information about the zoning of their home in our current map. So again, if we choose a hypothetical homeowner in this vicinity on Bolero, they would conclude that they are in the R2 district. Well, that's off for a couple reasons. One, the settlement agreement treated that area as though it was R3. And two, they also need to be aware of unique provisions contained in the settlement agreement. So if you would look at the proposed map, it would show someone in the same location 3 things. One, the horizontal lines would say that they're in a community that was developed as a cluster. 2, the yellow background would indicate that they're in the R3 district. And 3, the purple outline would indicate that they need to reference the settlement agreement for more information about the use of their parcel. I mentioned this is the 5th draft. There's been quite a bit of conversation. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their outstanding work in developing a proposal for the board's consideration. And with that, I'm happy to either turn the floor over to Chairman Croft to discuss his additional proposal or answer any questions you may have to this point about the proposal.
Well, let's do the questions on draft number 5 first, while it's still fresh in our mind. I attended a lot of the meetings, so this is, seeing the final result is gratifying, and I think the way you presented it is what we wanted to accomplish. Haven't really dramatically changed everything. We've redefined it so it's more useful. Does anybody have any questions before we go back to draft 4, which is what was presented to the Planning Commission and I guess the Study Commission reviewed it, and then in the final meeting, they eliminated an area that I would like to be re-included. Or they eliminated the zoning change in an area I'd like to be established. That's a better way of saying it. Any questions? All right, if you can turn to your map 4. I apologize, but for the record, I want to read a statement so that it is in the record. And just start by saying, I did attend all but one of the ordinance task force meetings since I've been elected supervisor. And I've attended all the Planning Commission meetings except for the one where they removed what I was interested in. And I apologize for missing last week's meeting of the Planning Commission. I had a family commitment that I could not rearrange. And I want to explain my reasoning for the proposed new rural mixed use as proposed in draft 4. That's the 4 up there. There are 3 lots. You have, if you look, as you're looking at the page directly to the top, you have a area that's zoned. No, not to the top. There you go, the purple. The purple is in West Brandywine Township. It is zoned rural mixed use, I believe.
Correct.
and already contains a commercial property, the dentist office. Across from that is the bank, and then there's another area down there which I believe is vacant right now. And across the bank is the one down here. Where the RM is the area that was approved for a Wawa and a CVS, which the CVS is still active. The Wawa has withdrawn because of riparian encroachment problems that they didn't want to have to deal with. But it's still zoned that way, and they have other zoning going up 322. So my reason for proposing a rural mixed use on the far end of our township there along 322 is first, I want to, is to provide more potential small commercial development space. First, I want to thank the review committee and the planning commission for their effort and input to the township's proposed update of the zoning map. This is very important to the township. And with the completion of our comprehensive plan, it is important that we update the zoning map to complete the process. Second, I believe this is the time to address the points raised in the community survey concerning ways to accommodate commercial opportunities available in the township. The comprehensive plan, the final comprehensive plan as approved, included a section covering key findings. The number one key finding was the East Reeseville Extension Road. The number two key finding, based on the residents' input, was residents wanting more areas to allow for growth in small businesses. In the same findings, it was acknowledged that the real estate market has changed since the last comprehensive plan, which is over 10 years old, and the master plan for Guthriesville may need to be adjusted to reflect the realities of what areas are really available and are suitable for commercial development in the Guthriesville area due to traffic, congestion, riparian buffers, parking areas, et cetera, et cetera. As an example, I used to own 3 parcels within the Guthriesville Village Center zoning district, which is now whatever you call it, VE?
The base zone in the Guthriesville Village is called TND1,
All right.
Traditional Neighborhood
So
Development.
I own 3 parcels within the Guthriesville TND1 zoning district. 2 parcels were developed prior to 1990 with great difficulties to overcome back then, including a massive seam of bedrock running through the properties on that side of the road, which also comes across the road and interfered with the township. And just for your knowledge, they ran into rock over here on Brandywine Walk and were blasting all day. So there is a bedrock outcropping which really limits what you can do. And the steep slopes were difficult to engineer through, and obtaining PennDOT highway occupancy permits took a great effort. The third parcel that I formerly owned is where the Learning Center is, completed between the Laird Building and the Hopewell Pharmacy and the Guthriesville Plaza. The Learning Center parcel had been up for sale for over 7 years before being sold to the Learning Center. During this process, the commercial brokers that we engaged all said that unfortunately Guthriesville was just not marketable for small retail businesses. I believe that it is not reasonable to have any real development in Guthriesville. And I think if you read the comprehensive plan, you'll see that we've backed away for making that a priority. With all that said, in studying the zoning map draft, I believe there was an opportunity to add a new 21-acre area along Horseshoe Pike and Little Washington Road that is in an area already zoned for and has commercial uses in West Brandywine Township. And referring back to the comprehensive plan, I wanted to address a couple of the survey questions relevant to having more commercial space in the township. Question 13 of the survey asks, what services should the township engage to better serve the residents? The number one response out of the top 12 is, quote, provide more space for restaurants, small businesses, shops, retail, and convenience stores. Question 19 was, what is your desired vision for the future of the township? Again, there were the top 12, it was providing more retail, potential retail space was the fourth out of 12 listed. And again, the residents' comments was, need an area to promote small, locally owned businesses, restaurants, coffee shops, farmers markets, miscellaneous retail, et cetera, et cetera. As I have met with residents during the last couple years, their number one question to me is, of course, East Reeseville Road extension, but the number two is, why can't we have more area devoted to small retail? Not big boxes or anything, but small retail. So again, I looked upon this as a situation that, since it's already almost surrounded by retail, would be an area that we could make retail with the new zoning map change, because they're only changed very rarely. In addition, one of the properties, the one on the northbound side of 322, has some historic structures. And if we were to rezone this commercially, you have a better chance of preserving those structures, because commercial people will figure that into their building costs, whereas builders will not want to be bothered. So I looked upon it as helping preserve those two historic buildings up there. And they're also tucked away, wouldn't interfere with development, and they may even become part of a retail development, the barn and the house. So with all this said, I've lived in East Brandywine now for 44 years. And in the last 30 years, I hate to say this, but the only changes in the Guthriesville Village concerning new development has been the Early Learning Center, a new township building, the Hopewell Pharmacy, and the demolition of two historic structures next to the Hopewell Pharmacy.
Tombstone.
Right.
Tombstone deal.
Well, no,
That was there, but it was already.
Right, I had them all listed already there, and I said, that's too many, so I just wanted to talk about new. I mean, the Crop Center and the Laird Building and the Guthriesville Plaza were built in 1988, 89, and 90. So again, I believe this area will provide, even though it's only 21 acres, at least another area that may be viable for commercial development and allow small businesses to have options, or a developer to develop options to locate some retail in East Brandywine and make the township a better place to live for our residents based on the survey. So thank you for letting me review my thoughts. I apologize for missing the meeting where I could not share my thoughts with the group. So I would like to, of course, discuss this, but I would hope that the supervisors would support me and we send it back to the Planning Commission to have their consultants re-review it and write the zoning change, or I guess that's the right word, write a zoning regulations that would match the RM that's already around it in West Brandywine. Yes, sir.
This upper portion of the triangle is currently the DMB, or the old DMB?
No, that is. See, there's a break here.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the S&T Bank, that's the dentist, that's the Wawa and the CVS. We're gonna go back there.
I'm drawing.
The faded coloration represents parcels in West Brandywine Township, and they're coded according to West Brandywine Township's code, their range of zones. So RM isn't a zone that exists in East Brandywine Township.
It's
It's a West
not.
Brandywine zone.
And the planning commission, when they were reviewing this, thought the RM was more flexible for for small retail development, and recommended that if we go forward with it, that it mirror or match West Brandywine's RM.
All right, so this is still East Brandywine.
No, this is East Brandywine, this is West Brandywine.
That big white line is
Is
the
the,
township.
right,
border.
this is the separation between the township.
Okay, all right, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but this is the individual who used to work for Downtown National Bank's house?
Yeah, Formica.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Brian Formica.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
I know Brian.
Yep, and then this is where we rent skid steer.
Right.
Okay, I know, all
Correct.
right.
There's 3 parcels.
Yep.
You could go into others if you wanted, but
If I'm not-
in
if I'm-
meeting with Luke,
I believe there's a stream running.
yes, there's wetland issues.
Yeah,
You're not gonna get
yeah,
any big
yeah,
development
yeah,
up there.
yeah, yeah,
But you
yeah.
might get somebody that comes in and puts in a
Yep.
series of
Yeah.
little stores and rebuilds the barn and the house.
I don't have a problem with it up that direction.
And it may never get developed.
right,
But then
right.
but
There's a-
nobody's gonna build houses there anyway because of the commercial development that's there.
So if you pull that up, Luke, I know you can pull up there, so. And there's your stream going through.
Right. So it's still developable, but it's
yeah,
challenging.
yeah.
You prevent anything big going in.
Correct. Okay.
And quite frankly, you have to face the fact that unless you demolish all the homes along 322 in Guthriesville, you can't really widen the road, quiet the traffic. I've walked that area, I've parked in the parking lots, I've walked that area. You've got riparian buffer issues, you've got all sorts of stuff that it's not going to be commercially feasible. A developer, if he wants to build a small group of stores, is better off starting on fresh ground, not trying to rehab 150-year-old houses. Quite frankly, we have an issue now, right? The one house that had the fire, they can't afford to bring it up to code, which they have to do.
When it's, so you were considering to be labeled mixed use?
That's what I was, and then the committee that we established, which consisted of the planning commission and other members, said our mixed use wouldn't be appropriate for there, we should match West
All
Brandywine.
right, so my last,
Which is in your packet, which
Yep.
was,
my final question is mixed,
there it is.
So what we're looking at is a chapter from West Brandywine Township's code. It's
All right.
not East Brandywine Township code. And so, in general, when you come to a section where we're defining what happens in a zone, there's a purpose statement, and then there's a bulk area, and then there is use restrictions. So that's the purpose area. Is there a particular area of the code where you would like me to go to?
I was more wondering, if mixed use in this situation falls under strictly commercial, or mixed use could include residential as well.
Yes.
And if it includes residential as well, what would the size lot limit be for residential? In other words, off the top of my head, I think it's R3, no, maybe it is R3, R2 or R3 is 2.5 acres or something along that.
R1 is 3 acres. The others are all smaller.
So, that would be my concern. I wouldn't want, if it was gonna be mixed,
Overlay, right? Or you're gonna change it to commercial?
Well, this is what I put, what's listed on here is what I'm intending.
yeah, I guess I just wanted, for number 8, single-family dwelling, I wanted to clarify.
There already are single-family dwellings.
Right, but in other
Go
words,
down, though, it's conditional uses next, and they'll say multifamily.
right, I think if we're going to do this, I think it should say similar to an R1 where it's minimum 3-acre parcels, because what you don't want to have is an open-ended item where someone could come in and say, oh, it's mixed use, so I'm gonna build houses, and it wasn't the intended use, but they are permitted to do so. Next thing you know, you have a little,
Right, no, I agree, I agree with that. There's minimum lot width.
yeah, see, that's,
Well, so.
Size
would-
1 acre,
would
that's
we-
fine.
Okay, so if, I think the proposal, if we were to work on it some more, would be to create a zone that's not currently in the township's code. But what we would be comparing it to is that its existing zone, which is R3. And would you suggest that it should be more or less restrictive than R3?
well, more restrictive on houses, less restrictive, and I don't have a concern with his property suggestions, but I don't, as I said, if it's 1 acre, that's still, as Jason just pointed out, that's still 10 homes.
Not a minimum lot size is 1 acre per home.
Well, I would,
But that's not the purpose of it, right? The
and bear in
purpose
mind,
is
that
not
may
to-
be allowed under the existing R3.
Right. But I'm saying, I don't want to jump down this rabbit hole if all of a sudden we're not crossing our,
Okay, so, you know,
I anticipated that it would exclude multifamily dwellings.
right. And I don't have a problem with if we put that verbiage in it either.
Like
yeah,
townhouses.
I think I get the gist of what you're saying. So we, in response to a demand or a request from our residents for more commercial opportunities on a small density, are considering changing the zone in an area of our community. It would be a real shame if we went through all this trouble and all we wound up with is more high-density houses.
Right.
The whole spirit of the operation was to encourage or to create locations for medium or low-density commercial uses.
Because village commercial allows the houses and the businesses, and I don't think that that's,
And TND was supposed to, but.
Right.
But the businesses can't make money being on the,
correct,
and nobody wants to live above a business.
correct. So, yeah, again, I don't have a problem with it, provided we specify.
Make sure we
no-
tighten up all that.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
I think that was my vision too. My vision is, how can I provide space since we only do this once every 10, 12 years? Number one. Number two is, don't want big box or any of that stuff. I think the residents are also unrealistic about wanting restaurants all over the place when we're still a dry township. They don't understand that. But I wanted to at least provide an area that is already being used commercially in a neighboring township that could serve the purpose of small retail, a small center, and it was also protect the 2 historic buildings, because commercial people will figure into their budget to stabilize or fix or even use the buildings.
Right.
So you're right, I would prefer to prohibit.
As in, make the existing single-family homes there non-conforming?
No,
No.
changing those, giving the right to do multi-house development.
See, I don't think
It
you're,
looks like in this West Brandywine ordinance, you can only do 2-family and multifamily if it's in an historic structure.
Right.
That's what, I'm looking at it
Right.
quickly,
Yeah.
that's what it looks like it says.
Yeah,
And that's by conditional use.
and without a magnifying glass.
Right.
I needed one too. so.
I'm the guilty party there. I was trying to save paper, so I shrunk the font size. I'm pretty much in trouble either way. People complain about the paper wastage, and they complain about the small font.
So I think all the comments
Yeah.
tonight, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I just need a vote to push it back to the planning commission to come up. I mean, they're the ones who came up with the idea to begin with. That's why I was kind of shocked that they took it out at the last minute.
I'll make a motion to send draft 5 back to the planning commission to reincorporate a little bit more commercial at the corner of Little Washington and Horseshoe Pike.
Do you want draft 5 or just draft 4?
Draft 4.
That was included on draft 4.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you. I will mention that I had called Jim Pascala and discussed it with him last Thursday. So this will not come as that I was going to recommend that we go back and revisit it. So I'm not blindsiding him. He understood.
If I may, I think it might be helpful to convey to the planning commission what sort of, what the
Suggestions.
vision is. In
Yep.
other words, I presume you don't want another strip center there.
Well,
So,
if it fits in historically, yeah.
well, there is no such thing as an historic strip
No,
center.
no. But the, no,
Well,
no, no,
like-
no, no,
like
no.
Eagle-
Have you ever
Eagle-
been to Lahaska or?
Yeah, but
Look
you're
at
not,
Eagle.
well, and, okay, what I'm saying is, I think it's important for the planning commission, you know, if they're gonna consult with David Sweet or somebody else to understand, you know, what's the vision?
I'll try
Because
not to
I
ever
don't
miss a
think it's
meeting
like-
again.
I don't think it's like CVS, right? I mean, they
No,
got,
but-
their ordinance allows CVS.
Having built retail, what you do is, the typical store is 1,200 square feet. So if you want to have small retail and make it a little more historical, so you don't have as much windows and this and that, the stores are 800 square feet.
Yeah, I'm
And
not,
more.
all I'm saying is, it might be important for them to understand what your vision is.
Okay. And they're the ones who gave me the vision. That's what surprises me.
May I-
Because they studied that zoning and thought it was good what West Brandywine had done.
Yeah, I think the most appealing thing about what we have shamelessly copied from West Brandywine's code is their purpose statement, and speaking to what the solicitor mentioned, I just draw your attention to the purpose statement there. There's a few things in there that seem to mesh well with where I think the board's expectation is. So if you'll bear with me, I'll read from that. It says, the rural mixed-use district is designed to focus on a mixture of higher intensity residential and non-residential development in close proximity to arterial roads, building on historic development patterns. The following specific design purposes are established: to facilitate development which results in a massing and grouping of structures that creates a cohesive sense of place, not visually dominated by large expanses of parking. It is intended that such development complement the character of the surrounding area and, to the greatest extent practicable, maintain open lines of sight at points of scenic view. To encourage development which provides for complementary mixed uses, including residential uses, as well as small-scale commercial, service, and employment-oriented development. To discourage conventional single-story strip development. To promote coordination of pedestrian and vehicular access and parking, and to minimize traffic congestion and turning movement conflicts on arterial roads, and to moderate the impacts of impervious surface introduced within development areas.
Well, you know, that's all well and good, but I will just give one example. We have a zoning district called Traditional Neighborhood Development 2. And what we got was traditional ugly townhouses, or not traditional ugly town. So there's a disconnect between the purpose statement and the regulations, what the regulations let you do. And I think probably West Brandywine example is, that's you just read, it's supposed to have an historic context, but I saw the plan for the CVS. It's ugly CVS. So we need to be very careful how it's crafted. And that's why I said, and I'm sorry, I'm getting way out of the realm of anything illegal, but if the board has a vision for what they'd like to see there, someone needs to make sure the regulations require that vision to be implemented. For example, I said for years, why didn't we require alleys, alley loaded? Then we would have gotten the traditional neighborhood development, but we didn't. That, I won't say anymore.
Right, I agree with everything, so, all right, well, that's something we'll all watch. Any other discussion on that? All right, item 8, subdivisions and zoning applications. None. Item 9, ordinance and resolutions for consideration. There's none. Item 10, public comment on non-agenda items. Yes, sir.
Like to make a comment, but it does pertain to what you guys were just talking about.
You got to come up here so the secretary can hear.
My name is Francis Jaraski. I live at 300 North Buck Road, and I can certainly understand what you're wanting to accomplish there, but as I'm sitting here, in my head, I start building it. And the first thing that hits me is there's no sewer. And I don't know if there's any sewer opportunity in West Brandywine. And the closest sewer is going to be at Culberson Run. I think there's a pump station probably a mile and a half down to the Washington Road. So there's going to be some pretty heavy lifting to get that kind of development in that corner. But it's not impossible, but you're going to have to develop some type of sewer system.
Correct, but I,
I know West Brandywine had trouble because they had to do on-site sewer because they don't have sewer.
right, there's no sewers.
Sewer opportunity
Right.
there. I know there's a water main, but, you know, I think it would be a great, I know Guthriesville Village has the sewer, and that was, you know, from a logistics standpoint,
But it didn't for years.
I understand, but it does now. But that's the first thing that came to mind with
I'm
regards
aware-
to
I'm aware
the
of the sewage
practicality of it actually ever happening.
It may not, but if you don't provide the opportunity, you'll never
No,
know.
I understand, and hey, it's great, it's, you know, I think it would be great if it could happen. The first thing that hits me when I go to put my shovel in the ground is what am I doing with the sewer? So that's all I have to say.
All right, no,
All right, thanks.
very good point, you're absolutely right on. Any notices? The notice is there was no executive sessions have been held between Friday, April 7th, 2023, and the PM session on April 20th, 2023. Move for adjournment.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.